Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. We are here at Asus's booth for Computex 2026 to check out some of their brand new gaming monitors that they've just announced at the show. One of the key highlights is the new 24.5-inch 1080p 540Hz tandem WOLED panel that they've just announced for esports gaming. So a brand new size, one of the smallest OLED monitors that we've seen so far. They've also got a new 32-inch RGB stripe, 4K monitors. We'll check out that and a couple of other different options. So let's get into it after this.
Our 2026 Computex coverage is brought to you by MSI and their GeForce RTX 50 series graphics cards, including flagship models like the Supreme Liquid and Vanguard, both of which delivered class-leading results in our testing. Powered by NVIDIA's Blackwell architecture, RTX 50 series GPUs are the ultimate way to experience ray tracing, delivering more realistic lighting and visual fidelity than ever before. You'll also benefit from AI-powered DLSS 4.5 frame generation and NVIDIA Reflex for smoother, more responsive gameplay. So for more information on MSI's GeForce RTX 50 series of graphics cards, please check the links in the video description. Finally, a big thank you to G.Skill for helping to make our Computex trip possible this year. G.Skill offers an outstanding range of DDR5 memory with AMD Expo and AMD Expo featuring ultra-low latency support specifically designed to maximize AMD Ryzen performance. So for more information, please check the links in the video description.
So we're here at Asus to look at some of their brand new monitors at Computex 2026. And the first one that caught my eye, of course, is a 32-inch 4K WOLED. This one using the new RGB stripe subpixel layout that LG Display introducing in 2026. Now back at CES, we saw the 27-inch version of this panel. That was the ROG Swift PG27 UCWM. This is the PG32 UCWM. So essentially, LG Display are producing two variants of the same panel technology, one in a 27-inch size and one in a 32-inch size. We're able to confirm from Asus reps here that both of those panels will have essentially identical performance, so same brightness specs, same subpixel layout, same coding, same features and everything. You're just going to be able to buy it in two different sizes, which is nice to hear, and both of them will also be available around the same time, so similar release date for both sizes. We were told that potentially available in October of 2026. They weren't 100% sure on final release timing, but sometime in that late Q3 to early Q4 timing for this particular monitor. No price for this model either. However, we were told that considering this is a PG model, you should see similar pricing for the PG32 UCWM as previous PG32 monitors. So similar with the ROG STRIX models, there's some new XG monitors. Those are going to be available at a similar price to the previous generation models. We're also able to find out some of the specifications of this panel, which are now more finalized than they were back at CES. So back at CES, Asus weren't sure whether this panel would be True Black 400 or True Black 500 spec. It turns out it will be a True Black 400 monitor. They weren't quite able to get it up to the 500 tier because of some power constraints with the new subpixel layout. Essentially, with this particular WOLED, in removing the white subpixel and only going with RGB, there are now some power issues that LG Display, I guess, are running into and Asus are running into. It means that to hit the same brightness levels as we saw from the previous panels, we do have to utilize, they do have to utilize additional power to get there. So this panel will have 250 nits of full screen white brightness and 1000 nits of peak brightness. So not quite the level that we've seen from some of the previous WOLEDs from Asus, but still similar to current generation 32-inch 4K technology. We're also told that there will be some changes to the power delivery system that's being used for these new tandem OLEDs. So they're moving to GaN technology that you see through a lot of power supplies and chargers these days. This apparently improves efficiency by up to 35%. It means they're able to cool down the panel, temperatures aren't as much of an issue, and so they can, again, achieve the same brightness that they were able to achieve with some of the previous monitors that they've produced. So yeah, this is going to be a very interesting product in terms of how competitive it is with QD-OLEDs. We saw earlier from MSI that new 32-inch 4K 360 Hz QD-OLED that will be coming in the first quarter of 2027. That's not going to be too far after this particular monitor. So yeah, we'll have to check out how the performance is going to compare from those two different products. Again, things like panel dimming, things like screen uniformity, those are all going to be question marks between the WOLED and QD-OLED versions, although Asus have not announced QD-OLEDs using that particular panel just yet. What else is there to say? This is going to still use the true black glossy finish that Asus has been using for a while now with their WOLEDs. It will also support Dolby Vision. They told us about an upgraded version of the Neo proximity sensor. The main feature addition there is adding sensitivity settings. So you'll be able to make it slightly more or slightly less sensitive compared to the original sensors that they were offering in some of their previous monitors. We heard from some of you guys using the Neo proximity sensor that it would occasionally either not detect you returning in front of your screen or not quite working the way it should. With the sensitivity settings, you should get a bit more control over that. And of course, DisplayPort 2.1. They've got this nice, I guess, microscope setup, so we can indeed confirm that unlike the MSI model we saw the other day where they were using a dummy panel, that this actually is the final version of the panel that will be utilized when it goes to mass production soon. So yeah, like I said, expecting this one around October. As a PG model, it should be quite expensive, but yeah, outside of that, pretty keen to check this one out. But let's go take a look at the new 24.5-inch OLED. So we're here with a panel that a lot of you guys have been requesting, especially if you've been an esports gamer. This is the world's first 24.5-inch OLED monitor of any kind. So this is the first time we're seeing this specific size used for an OLED gaming monitor. It is a 1080p 540 Hz display, which Asus are calling, and let me just get this right, the ROG STRIX OLED XG259 QWPG ACE. Now, Asus earlier told me what every single one of those letters meant, and I immediately forgot. I think ACE refers to their esports line, something like that. The other letters, who knows? But this is a tandem WOLED monitor, so it looks like LG Display going to be first to market with a 24.5-inch 1080p screen. And yeah, it's offering it in a size that is, I guess, preferable for people who are pro gamers. So a lot of the previous OLED panels that we've got have been, you know, the 27-inch size at 1440p, the 32-inch size at 4K, that sort of thing. And while some of those have had dual mode support, for example, so the 32-inch panel can do 1080p 480 Hz, it's still quite a large screen at 32 inches. Some of those had emulation modes for esports sized displays. But the thing that we consistently hear from you pro gamers out there is that you really like the smaller size. It keeps most of the game within your field of view, makes it easier to game. Not something I'd be super familiar with because I kind of suck at those type of games, but the people that are good tell me this is a really important factor. So the fact that we now have that specific size with OLED, it makes it a big upgrade to some of the LCDs, which is what we're seeing here. So previously, a lot of these sizes were TN LCDs, sometimes IPS LCDs. They just don't have the performance and specs that you would see from an OLED. So don't have the black levels. The response times can be okay, but not nearly as fast as you would get from an OLED like this. And then of course, this does support HDR. Now, as we talk about the HDR specs, I was really impressed with some of the things that Asus were saying. So this is a Display HDR True Black 600 spec panel. So much higher than we've seen from some previous OLEDs. I think some of the previous WOLEDs might have been in that True Black 500 tier, but we're up to 600 tier with the 1080p version. They tell me 1700 nits peak brightness at a 1.5% APL, so that's much higher than we've seen from previous tandem WOLEDs and of course QD-OLEDs. They said 10% window brightness is going to be between 600 and 700 nits, so again that's very high and would meet the True Black 600 spec. And then for full screen brightness around 390 nits, which I think would be a record for my OLED testing. Some of the tandem OLEDs we've seen in that 330 to 350 nit range, QD OLEDs about 300 nits. So this is going to be substantially brighter. And that's going to help with features like ELMB black frame insertion. That feature is going to be brighter. The uniform brightness mode is going to be, running at a higher brightness in the uniform mode. And then of course for SDR brightness as well, you're going to see quite a high 390 nit level. I've been told that in terms of pricing and release date, that sort of thing, that this monitor is going to be mid to late Q4 of this year. So it is going to come out this year, but probably after the 32-inch and 27-inch RGB stripe tandem WOLEDs that we were just looking at. So slightly after those monitors, no confirmed pricing just yet. If I had to guess, it's going to be quite expensive just based on some of the other Asus monitors that we've seen in sort of those high refresh rate categories. The 1440p 540 Hz monitor, for example, is over $1,000 US, and some of the previous LCDs have been in that sort of range as well. Again, don't have final pricing, but it's probably not going to be overly cheap. Now, in terms of screen coating, this is using the True Black glossy coating, like a lot of the previous WOLEDs that they've used. We asked about matte coatings because sometimes we've heard from panel vendors that they prefer using matte for esports monitors just because of the lack of reflections and that sort of thing. But we were told from Asus that when they spoke to pro gamers, that the pro gamers weren't super concerned about whether it was glossy or matte. They said that in a lot of tournaments and conditions like that, all the lighting is optimized to completely eliminate reflections. So it actually doesn't really matter whether it's glossy or matte. And then on top of that, because you do get the removal of coating grain and that sort of thing, it is a little bit clearer, a little bit sharper in terms of edge detection and that sort of thing. So their justification does make sense. Again, I'm not a pro gamer, so I'm just kind of going on their word. We might have to speak to some to see whether any of that stuff is true. The other thing you might be interested in is the sub-pixel layout. So we just talked about RGB stripe WOLEDs. This is not an RGB stripe, still RGWB at the 1080p resolution. So yeah, that's just one of the things to go through, I guess. It's going to be using the new GaN power supplies that we saw with that other monitor as well. Another interesting thing I've learned here at Computex is relating to how pro gamers set up their monitor. Not something I've ever really considered, that you'd be going around measuring the exact height that you want your monitor. But the thing I was told, not just from Asus, but from multiple people at the show, is that pro gamers, apparently when they go to tournaments, they want to replicate the absolute exact conditions that they use at home to ensure that everything is just muscle memory, completely identical, no competitive disadvantage. They go around with the measuring tape, they measure the exact height, the exact angle, the desk height, the seat height, everything to ensure it's completely the same as the setup that they use at home. So one of the things that Asus have done with this monitor is they've actually measured out some of this stuff for you on the, not just the stand base, but also the stand pillar. So if you were using your monitor at a specific height at home, you can very quickly adjust that based on the markings on the side. If you're using a specific angle, you can use the angle measurement on here as well, and you can align your keyboard using the measurement at the front. So that just allows you to replicate the setup that you've got at home easily without having to use a measuring tape. So again, things that you learn when you're not a pro gamer that pro gamers do. I found that particularly interesting, and Asus are providing that here. ELMB black frame insertion will also be available with the XG259QWPG Ace. However, it's going to be a very similar ELMB implementation to previous OLED monitors. So it's going to be, every second frame is going to be black. So in the 540 Hertz configuration, it's going to go down to 270 Hertz. There's no new fancy ELMB or black frame insertion feature for this specific panel, just the same sort of implementation we've got previously. That may disappoint some people, but the panel technology just isn't quite there yet for any more advanced versions of that feature. So yeah, this is one of those panels that I've heard whispers about for a long time. I've come to trade shows for a while and we've gotten sort of NDA information, little off the record tidbits here and there that, should we or shouldn't we do a 24.5 inch OLED monitor? I always thought that it should be produced, so it's good to see that it's available or will be available towards the end of this year. So we'll be testing this one out, of course, in due time, but yeah, let's move on to something else. So we're here at Asus's incredibly loud booth to talk about one of the products that's actually already launched into the market, but I think is reasonably interesting for people interested in ultra-wide monitors. So we've got the ROG STRIX OLED XG34 WCDMS. Again, product names. So basically this is a 34-inch 3440 by 1440 QD OLED monitor using the new V-Stripe panel. So it's got the RGB stripe sub-pixel layout, the new brightness improvements, and we tested some of the 360 Hertz versions of this monitor earlier in the year. We looked at the PG version. Well, essentially Asus are providing an XG version for people that want to save a little bit of money. So it's got largely the same specifications as the 360 Hertz version, but it's cut down to 280 Hertz instead. So, like I said, same design, same black shield film, so you're getting the nice improvements to ambient light reflectivity. It's got VESA Display HDR True Black 500 certification, so that means the same brightness spec as those original models. And what we've been told is that this particular product has just been launched into the market. So this new panel variant has just come in. I think I'm going to be looking at an Alienware version of this very shortly, but also there's going to be an Asus version. And yeah, it's just designed to be a lower cost model. The PG model is like $1,200 US, so hopefully this model is going to be below $1,000 is with the price range that I'd be hoping for, though I don't have final pricing at the moment. So yeah, connectivity options, DisplayPort 1.4, so I believe that's also cut down compared to the PG version, USB-C with just 15 watts of power delivery. But because it's the same panel at just a slightly lower refresh rate, it could be a great option for people that want that V-Stripe QD OLED.
Also supporting our Computex coverage is Be Quiet and their excellent new range for 2026. Some of their latest offerings include power supplies like the Dark Power 6, AIOs such as the Pure Loop 3, additions to the Light Base lineup, and a great selection of peripherals. Be Quiet's entire range is German designed, enjoying excellent build quality and silent performance. So for more information, please check the links in the video description.
So Asus also announced at the show the ROG Strix OLED XG32 UQWMS, but it's actually not here on the show floor for whatever reason. I would have been keen to check it out, but yeah, they're not showing it. So this is another 32-inch 4K tandem WOLED panel, but it's not using the RGB stripe version that is in the ROG Swift model that we looked at earlier. So this is more of a refresh of the existing 32-inch 4K WOLEDs that we looked at from Asus last year, but with an upgrade to tandem WOLED technology, bringing with it new brightness capabilities, better color volume, that sort of thing that we've seen from tandem WOLED for a while. So this model, again, 32-inch 4K, dual mode support, so 4K 240Hz and 1080p 480Hz. And it has features like, the OLED care sensor, reduced DisplayPort connectivity compared to the ROG Swift model. It is launching at the same time, at least from what we've been told, as the higher end model with the RGB stripe, but this uses the RGWB subpixel format. So essentially what that means, white subpixel, and that allows it to hit higher brightness levels than the RGB stripe model. So they're quoting display HDR True Black 500 spec, the RGB stripe model is True Black 400, and then peak brightness of up to 1500 nits, which is an upgrade on the previous WOLED model that they were using, which I think was only 1300 nits and True Black 400. So it's more of a iterative upgrade on that first generation model, still using the True Black glossy coating and all that nice good stuff. But again, we can't show it to you here, so I'm just kind of reading off their spec sheet that they've provided, but it should be a lower cost model, similar pricing to previous ROG Strix models, we've been told, and yeah, availability in that sort of Q4 sort of time frame. So we'll try to test that one out as well when we get the time, but my main focus, my main priority will be the RGB stripe models, which should be providing a bit more new and interesting technology to take a look at. All right, and that does it for the Asus booth at Computex 2026. Asus are producing a lot of new monitors with new panels, which is one of the most interesting things I love seeing at the show, these new formats, these new things that are going to bring experiences to you for the first time. So while I'm personally not an esports gamer and I'm not the biggest fan of the 24.5-inch size, I like larger monitors. One of the key things that we keep getting asked from people is, when are we going to get these smaller panel versions for people to use? So that new 24.5-inch 1080p panel is very interesting. And yeah, I think the brightness spec of up to 1700 nits is going to make it one of the brightest panels yet. So we'll get to testing that when it's available. But for me personally, yeah, that 4K 32-inch RGB stripe monitor, super interesting, new panel versions, 32-inch size, 27-inch size, super keen to check that one out when it's available. So yeah, that pretty much does it for Asus at Computex. If you want to see more Monitor Unboxed content as we go around some of the other companies and see their new products, we've got those right here on the channel as well. So stay tuned for plenty more coverage, but until next time, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.